So I was thinking, Scarlet and Violet are coming out. We still haven't heard about the gimmick that's going to be in the game. This is, of course, assuming that there is a gimmick, but given how the past few games have gone, I assume that at this point they feel contractually obligated to have a gimmick. What would that gimmick look like? Yesterday's reveal seemed to solidify the idea that time will be the major underlying mechanic for this game, so presumably the gimmick will have something to do with time. Now there are a bunch of different ways that could be taken. Maybe you get to stop your opponent from taking an action, or maybe once a battle you get to take an extra action in a given turn. And that seems pretty banal, and maybe in some cases it could be even broken. I wanted to take it in a bit more of an interesting step, and I have a few reasons for taking it in that step beyond just I think it would be cool. So let's get into it. So what I want to talk about are power spots. In Gen 8 specifically, Galar has these regions around the map where Dynamax power flows, right? In raid dens, that's where raid Pokemon are able to gain their Dynamax power, their Gigantamax power, depending. And so that region of the region of Galar is where you're allowed to Dynamax. In no other region are you allowed to Dynamax. You're not allowed to Dynamax against the random Ralts you find on the road. You can only do it if you're in a Dynamax den. Or you can do it when you're in a gym. And those gyms, generally speaking, are built around those Dynamax locations so that the Pokemon can easily Dynamax in the gym spots, and that's the draw and the attraction of the Galar gyms specifically. Why do I think they did this? I think that Game Freak said, alright, we don't want the players every single battle that they get into to be able to just Dynamax into these giant Pokemon and blow through the entire game with that Dynamax mechanic. That would be a little bit broken. And I also think it's just undesirable in general. I'll talk about that here in a second as to why I think it's a bad thing to be able to Dynamax in every single battle. Not only just from my perspective, but I think why Game Freak, from a game design standpoint, doesn't necessarily want us to be able to do that. And so having the power spots exist allows the gimmick to exist in the game while being corralled to specific game points. So now the question is, what if these power spots were portals in time, or conduits where I was able to peer into another time in the region's existence, and the local terrain might be affected by that wrinkle in time, so to speak. Similar to the Dynamax spots, this would be, just a local event, but that local event could maybe act as a, hey, I can go see into the past, or I can see into the future, and then people would be able to take advantage of this to make a more interesting battle, as it were. So why do I think that Game Freak would want to go in this direction? I hinted at it before. I don't think this is just a cool idea. I think Game Freak would want to use something more akin to this, and this is for three main reasons. The first one is the longer that the gimmick is going on in your game, or the more opportunities I have to use the gimmick, the longer everything's going to take. So let's think back to Gen 6. Back in Gen 6, they introduced Mega Evolution, and this was the first real gimmick that was core to the central theming of the game. Of course, Gen 3 gave us double battles, Gen 5 gave us rotation battles, but those weren't part of the core gameplay mechanics. Those were just little fun side gimmicks that you could participate in once in a while. But Gen 6 gave us Mega Evolution, and you were forced to interact with it on multiple occasions, chiefly when you got your Lucario with Corona. And you can't skip that, right? You have to do it in every battle after that. You now have your Mega Bracelet. So now, if you have a Pokemon in your party, which many people will because they'll have one of the Kanto starters with them, or they'll have that Lucario, you get to Mega Evolve. Now, before post-game, there aren't that many Pokemon that you have access to that are able to Mega Evolve, but there are some, and when you get to Oras, that list gets much bigger, and you're able to be Mega Evolving basically every battle that you're in. Of course, Mega Evolution could be busted, but for not all Pokemon was it busted. Mega Aerodactyl was pretty strong, but was it the most busted Pokemon? Is it going to blow through the entire game any more so than maybe Greninja or some of the other good Pokemon that you could have had in that game? I'm not entirely sold on that idea. So it wasn't game breaking, but what it was doing is taking up precious moments of your time. Granted, once you turn on the game, only the first time when you Mega Evolved, you get to see the full Mega Evolution cutscene. After that, they sort of pare it back and make it much shorter. But still, that's about 5 to 8 seconds of animation every single time you battle. And if you want to do that every single time you get into a wild encounter, then it's going to slow down your game time considerably as that multiplies. Of course, you're not forced to use the mechanic, but if I'm trying to design my game around it and I know a bunch of 5-year-olds want to press the big shiny button, well, that's going to take up time. In Gen 7, we got not only Mega Evolution returning, although that wasn't until the post-game, so we won't count it, but Z Crystals. Z Crystals you could use once a battle, but they were very powerful, and the thing with Z Crystals that I think is different from Mega Evolution is that any Pokemon could use it. If you have a Pokemon that uses normal type move, well, now you can use Normality and Z. You have a Pokemon that can use electric type moves, pretty early in the game you get the electric type Z Crystal. And if you have Pikachu, you can use the Picanium Z or whatever you want to go with. So basically, since every Pokemon in your team can hold a Z Crystal that they'll be able to use, you can whip that out every battle, almost guaranteed, right from very early on in the game with Fightinium and Normalium and whatever. So you get to the point where I sort of don't want to click the Z button, not because it would make the game too easy, but because it's making the game take too long. Those animations take forever, you gotta do your little dance every single time, there's no way to shorten it. And it just blows the game, it adds, maybe 30 minutes to the game experience by the time you get to the end, in my estimation. So when you get to Gen 8, Dynamax, of course, has animations it has to go through, and the Dynamax moves take longer, but since you can only use them every so often, they don't really have that big of an impact on the flow of the gameplay. And I think that's one reason why Game Freak went in that direction. Maybe it was a coincidence, I don't know. The second point of interest is that VGC and Battle Stadium or Battle Spot singles, they have seasons. At least in this generation they do. And we're on season 12 or 13 or whatever it is. And those seasons have varying rule sets, and they do this to spice things up because you want to keep VGC fresh, and BSS is an afterthought. So what if I could have a mechanic that would allow me to create new seasons organically in VGC by simply switching which time period I was visiting, right? These power spots in my proposal will be able to change what local time period I'm in. And maybe that'll have effects on how the Pokemon are able to have powers. So if that's the case, then I could say, hey, this is the fire season, hey, this is the water season, and it'll just exist. Everybody will know what it means. We can have it for a month, and then we can move on. And it'll just change up the gameplay. They'll be taught it in the games, in the gyms, and then by the time they get to VGC, they'll understand what that's all about, and they can plan accordingly. The last reason I think that this would be a good idea for them is waifu potential. So in the Galar region, we had a couple of gyms that had different gym leaders depending on which game you played, different types associated with those gym leaders. And I think that with games like Pokemon Masters ZX and other marketing opportunities, the Game Freak can easily just plop down a few more stylized anime people and everybody's going to eat that up. But you can't necessarily fit 18 type associated gym leaders plus Elite Four members into a game without it becoming ridiculous. So if you can split them up between the past and the future games, right? Scarlet being the game for the past and Violet being the game for the future, then hey, now I can add tons of waifu people in there, and they split between the two games. And the reason that they're different is because, well, they have different power spots in their respective games, so they have different gym leaders to associate with those power spots. I think that would make a lot of sense. So, enough beating around the bush, let's talk about what these power spots will look like. So the first one we want to talk about is the normal power spot. This would be the absence, maybe we could say, of having a power spot. We are in the present day. Why is the present day normal type? Why not, you know? It's just going to be a normal gym battle with no restrictions, no crazy effects happening, and you can just play accordingly. I said that this is in the past. Obviously, I contradict myself by saying it's present day, but I'm trying to split these all up, all these types, into past and future. And so this one just happened to be lumped in with the past. But we'll ignore that for now, because it's obviously not the past. Alright, let's go on now to the water. The water power spot will have the effect of setting the rain. This is fairly obvious and straightforward. I decided to put this in the future category. Maybe there's some future where global warming is taken over, or maybe it's gone to the point where it's raining all the time for whatever reason. It's a water world outside, and we have a portal where we can take a peek into that alternate future timeline, and it's affecting the location where this wrinkle in time is happening, this power spot. And so now it's just really rainy all the time. So if I were to have a battle in this, a singles or doubles battle, the rain would start at the beginning of the battle, and it would be permanent. Now, if I decided to send in my Ninetales, or my Groudon, or whatever, or my Tyranitar, then the drought or the sandstorm or whatever, that would occur normally. But as soon as it goes down, then the rain comes back up. So what would this do for VGC? In VGC, if we had a season, then it might make me have the incentive to bring more water types or more rain abusers, because I know I'm going to get free rain for the entire battle. But then my opponent knows I'm going to do that, so either it's a water war, or they're going to bring things to try to counter that, try to take advantage of that. And that would change the flavor of that season much more strongly than it would otherwise, without bringing in restricted Pokemon, right? VGC never really has any shakeups to the metagame other than, hey, want to bring legendaries, that'll shake up the power dynamic. But this would favor certain types, it favors certain Pokemon. Certain Pokemon, of course, will always be good, but if they get done in by water or ice types or whatever, then maybe they wouldn't be good that season, and we'd get a lot more Pokemon variety, I think. Okay. Fire types would, of course, set the sun. I said this would be in the past. Maybe there was a time where there was lots of volcanoes going off, or maybe the primordial soup. Lots of heat happening in its history. So just take one of those times, and now we've got Trap set up for the entire battle. And this will not only favor fire types, but of course grass types. You know how something gets played. And you can sort of see where this is going. Maybe you take the Ice Ages, and you say, hey, you have a spot in the region where that Ice Age is spilling out into the environment, and during this time period there's lots of hail or snow, and so we're going to have that weather effect in play. And then finally, there would be a time maybe where the region was desertified, turned into a desert, or there was a dust bowl effect of some sort, and now we've got sandstorm all the time in this region. Maybe this could be a future time if humans really heck up the planet and everything is turned into a desert as well. Who knows? So those are the weathers, and now we move on to the terrains. Well, in the future, people are all about electricity, so might as well have a future time where everything's all zippy zappy and we've got electric terrain all the time. Once again, I think the electric terrain could be permanent. Who knows in this next game if the Tapus will be back? If the Tapus aren't back, then really the terrains will be limited unless you distribute them even more widely than they currently are. Rillaboom, of course, is a little bit busted in both singles and VGC. I'm hoping that it does not come back just for that reason. Not anything against Rillaboom, just I think Grassy Terrain is a little bit too annoying with the Grassy Glide combo. And if they were back, then, they would change the terrain accordingly, but then the terrain would go back once they were gone. Unfortunately, if they are back, then I think the terrain seasons might not be as impactful, simply because instead of abusing the terrain, I think people would seek to override it with their own, or just flat out ignore it, because there are so many good Pokemon, namely the Tapus plus Rillaboom, that can just do their own thing and not even care about the terrain. So, I don't know how I feel about that exactly, but it would depend on the Pokemon that were brought back in this particular game. Psychic terrain, maybe we made contact with aliens, a la Star Trek or something, so some of them have telepathic powers. Hey, now we've got the Psychic terrain set. And the past, I'm sure, you can find some farmland that's spilling into the present day, and it'll set up grassy terrain. Not too crazy, or not too much of a stretch of the imagination. Fairy typing is a little bit more imaginative. There are a lot of fairy tales. Of course, it's Pokemon, so you're going to have to distort the fairy tales of Spain into your own mythology, but that should be easy enough to do. You can just find any old folk tale or fairy tale of the region, spin it into a Pokemon version. Boom, now you've got some past time where fairies existed and roamed the land, and you can have a fairy gym or power spot that will set Misty terrain. Now we have to get a little more creative, or maybe less creative depending on how you think about these. Maybe you'll say, Ralts, these aren't creative at all. I'll say, oh well, darn, sorry. Steel types don't have any weather, they don't have any terrain, so you're just going to have to come up with something. I said, alright, we're going to give +1 defense to all steel types. You come in, sort of like Zamazenta, you just get a +1 aura or something like that just gives you +1. This can't be hazed away, and it just exists for the entire battle that you're in. Maybe it could be hazed away, I don't know about that part. The time period, maybe just some future age where everything's all mechanized. Maybe you want to put it in the past, make it the Industrial Revolution, I don't know. On a similar vein, we got ground type. Let's give +1 Spadef to all the ground types. Maybe there's a big earthquake happening and that spills over into a region, or maybe we've nuked the planet and now everything's sort of suffering a heat death and now there's a big drought and so nothing exists but dirt, and that would favor ground types. I don't know. Then one more, bug types are going to get +1 speed. I figured that because, bugs always zipping around doing their zippy thing, and so it makes sense to give them speed. Back in the day, when there were giant bugs roaming the planet, it seems like that would have been a time where bugs were pretty happy and pretty on top of things. So maybe if that was spilling into the present, that the bugs would feel more empowered, and so they would get +1 speed. A lot of bug types are pretty weak. Of course, things like Volcarona, this would make a menace, but you would deal with it during that season, and then the season would be over. And if you're going to give +1 to any typing, bug I don't think is too bad of an option compared to some of the other options you could choose. Alright, now this part I'm not as sold on. Poison types, let's give them all +1 attack and special attack. Why are we giving them both attack and special attack? Well, some of them are physically based, some of them are specially based, and you could just say give them +1 to their higher attack stat, and then the game would just have to figure that out. But then that would also suss out to your opponent which side you were on, which maybe for a few Pokemon that would make a difference. I don't know. You could just give them +1 to either attacking stat, though, and most of them would just choose the one. Although some mixed attackers might take advantage of both sides. I figured this would be some apocalyptic future where we've trashed the planet and pollution is everywhere, and poison types will be happy. I also considered for this one making toxic spikes on the field at the beginning of the battle, but then I thought, well, people would just run a poison type, send it out at the beginning, call it a day, and now it's just like a normal type. So I figured something that would boost poison types would be more interesting, because then you don't have to run a poison type, you can just run whatever you want. and you'll get benefits for doing so, but it's not necessary. On a similar vein, fighting types, let's give them all +1 attack. Most fighting types that are good are physical, and very few special attackers, so you can give the special attackers +1 to special attack as well. This one will obviously be caveman times. That's what they are pulling from with the legendary and the professor. They sort of have that caveman get up, and so that seems fairly clear that the fighting type would come from the past, and that would be caveman times. And then finally, dragons, I figure you can also give them all +1 special attack and attack. And this one, you're going to say, hold up, that's way too busted, or else you're insane. But I figure Game Freak never really cared about balance in the first place anyway, and if you're trying to make dragons really powerful and scary, then you would say, hey, give them +1 attack and special attack, and just let them run rampant this season, right? It's going to be the dragon season. Dragons got nerfed with the introduction of Fairy in Gen 6, and I think ever since then, they've been trying to claw their way back to the dominance that they used to have, and this would be a way to, at least for one season, to allow them to be really powerful. And, pull from more mythology, St. George killing the dragon, or whatever time period you want to pull from in Western European mythology where dragons were a thing. Now we have to get really creative, because I'm done with the stat boosting. We moved on from that. How about for flying types, we set up a tailwind when I switch in a flying type. So I've got a flying type in the back, I switch it in, tailwind gets set up. Now, I don't get to refresh it every time I send in my flying type, it's just when I set it up. And this will be a little bit busted, but if I can do it, and so can my opponent, then really it just comes down to when do I bring in my flying type and my positioning to get them in so I can refresh that. Additionally, if somebody sets up Trick Room, that's easily abusable, so it's not like your opponent wouldn't know that it was coming, because they'll know which terrain or which season or power spot that they're fighting in, so they will just plan for that accordingly. Ghosts. This one is sort of a cop-out, but I said, okay, what if ghosts are immune to status? They're already dead anyway, so how does a dead thing get status? I mean, how does a dead thing have hit points? But, the idea is that, okay, I've moved beyond being able to get burned by things, because I'm no longer on this mortal plane of existence. And so I figured that wouldn't be the weirdest option. I don't know exactly what time period you pull from. Pokemon, does some spooky stuff from now and again, and most of their really spooky stuff they either leave to the Pokedex, which people have become accustomed to being weird, or to weird Easter eggs off to the side that most people want to encounter. You don't want to pull from any past or future atrocities. So where do you find a lot of ghosts that aren't atrocities? Well, maybe just have some mass extinction event where all humans get wiped off the planet in some future, or maybe all Pokemon get blown up because of Yveltal or something, and maybe you pull in from that time period. I don't know. Have the story writers come up with that while we worry about the mechanics. And finally, the dark type, maybe you just have some cyberpunk future where dark type exists. I don't really know what the dark type is supposed to be, but this one I decided to get a little bit spicy with. Let's give +2 evasion to the dark types, because everything's super dark in this particular time rift, and you can't really see the dark types as a result. This one would be really annoying and nobody would like it, but you always have to have that one option that nobody likes. So that's all 18 types, and I think that overall this would allow Game Freak to say, hey, we've packed the games with different gyms and Elite Four spots, and then we can set up boss battles that will take advantage of this, right? Sort of similar to in Gen 8, there were gym leaders that would take advantage of weather or sometimes terrain, although not quite as much, and that would enhance the battles. And in Gen 7, you had a Wishy-Washy would set up the rain automatically when coming in, and they were able to give some of them auras to boost their stats as well. So similarly, in this game, you would be able to give the Pokemon unique boosts during the gym battles, which will make the boss battles that much more interesting in the main game. Then when it comes to VGC, you're able to say, hey, this month or maybe 2 months, we're going to have this particular boost or buff, and all your teams will have to change accordingly. Big shake up to the meta every time that happens. And then you can probably have a normal type for the worlds. I don't know how the VGC people would feel about this. Maybe some of them would say this is a terrible idea. But I think it's sort of a unique twist on time, and I think that it really has potential to be cool. So let me know what you think in the comments, and that's all for me today.